Continuing the study of Sefer Mareh Yaakov. As with each lecture, we're going to begin with something from Parshat Shiur. So this week we read Kitisa, but we also read Parshat Parah. We read one of the four special Maftir and Haftorahs that come in the lead up to Pesach. And I thought we would examine one of the interesting sentences in Chukat that's talking about Parah Adumah, that's talking about the red heifer. And if we'll remember, we've gone over this a couple of times, but we're going to go over the grammar again of the letters Beit, Gimel, Daled, Kaf, Pei, Tav. They come at the beginning of the word. We'll have a dot in them. We'll have a hard sound to them, except if the word beforehand ends in an aleph, hey, vav, or yud, and the two words are connected by the notes. If the two words are separated by the notes in the aleph, hey, vav, or yud, doesn't influence the beit gimel daled kaf the beged kefet letter that comes after it. So we have an interesting phrase: "V'dor b'nei Israel," you should speak to the people of Israel. "V'ikhu elecha farah aduma." Not para, but farah, with a soft pay without the dot. So, this pay at the beginning of the word here should have a dot in it. Mm-hmm. And clearly Mincha Chai tells us it does not have a dot in it. The letter that comes before it, Kaf Safit, is not one of our letters that is supposed to cancel out the dot. It's not an aleph, a hey, a vav, or a yud. But it is connected. It's a tlishak tana. So we know that tlishak tana is something that connects to the next word, but tlishak dola, the one that's turned the other direction, separates out the two words. And we'll talk about the note in a second once we get to context of what's going on here. So, how did elecha take away the dot from farah? So it turns out that elecha can also be written with a kaf hey at the end of the word. It implies either a male sense, with this being a hard kaf safit, or a female sense, kaf hey with a hey implied. And therefore, we've ended with a hey, and the pei is influenced. So, now we know why it's lost its dot, because it's got a connecting note, and it sort of ends with a hey. But, what's the implication of saying that they're going to take to you, in the feminine sense, farah? So in order to understand this, we need to understand what the concepts of masculine and feminine mean in a Torah sense. This is not that we all typify the male or we all typify the female. We all have some characteristics of each. But the pure female sense matches biologically the concept of what a female is. What's a female? A female is something that takes an idea or a concept that might be small, keeps it alive, nurtures it, allows it to grow and have existence in this world, and hopefully to have permanence. What's the male sense? The male sense is something that has lots of small ideas that in and of themselves might not have any continuation, but to continue to pour all of those ideas into the world, hopefully that something feminine will catch one of those ideas and turn it into something that has permanence and will grow. So, why is God's name mostly male when we read through Torah? Because mostly He is the ultimate giver. He's giving things for us to take and to maintain and to hopefully make grow. However, we do have a small number of times where God's name is mentioned in the feminine sense, because we want the small thing that He's given at that point to be something that He maintains. So the example that I always give is also in this week's Parsha, so we'll talk about it. When God threatens to destroy the Jewish people, Moshe comes up to God and says, V'im kacha at oseli, mecheni na misifrecha asher katzavta. If that is the way that you, God, are going to treat me, then are you going to treat the people of Israel? Then you should erase me from your book. And what does he say? Not atah, not you in the masculine, but at, you in the feminine. Why? If God is going to continue the reality in which the people of Israel have been destroyed, and he makes a new nation out of Moshe, Moshe doesn't want any part in that future. So he's saying, if you're going to maintain the future the way that you've threatened to do, at, feminine, you're going to take this reality and you're going to make this reality a permanent one that's going to be nurtured and grow. So that's why he refers to God in the feminine there. So, every time you look at the name of God now, and you look at the pronoun that goes with it, you should be able to have a sense of, is this something that's an idea, a potential, something that's being given, that we have to do something in order to make it bigger, or that God has given it as a gift, and we need to, again, make it flourish and grow? Or is this something where God says, this is the reality and this is the way that it's going to stay, and there are very few of those, because we have the chira chofshit, we have free choice. So coming again, Bikhu elecha farah, what is the idea of Tuma, and what is the idea of paraduma? Again, this is something that we never can fully understand, because it's given as the ultimate chok, the ultimate rule that you're not going to understand completely. But in some sense, we know that Tuma, this sense of having distance from God, distance from eternity, is something that we definitely don't want to maintain. So anything that is a remedy for Tuma, anything that gives us the ability to go out of that state and into a state of purity, is something that we do want to maintain. We always want the ability to get out of that place. So, what are we asking for? You're going to take to you, in the sense of, you're always going to have access to this remedy. That's why it becomes feminine, because you want this remedy to be something that's always there for us. Elechat lishaktana is something that emphasizes the word, but focuses us forward onto the word that's going to come after it. It always comes at the end of a word. If the syllable that's not the one that gets the accent on it is also strongly emphasized, then we'll see earlier on in the word that there's a second klishaktana. So this one tells you that it's klishaktana, and this one tells you that this syllable is accented. So it's elecha, not elecha. So that's why we have two of them. And we've emphasized the word that you're going to take to you in the hope that this is something that's permanent, that you have a remedy. Farah aduma. Again, with the dot having been cancelled. Why? Because of elecha in the feminine sense, with the joining note of klishaktana.
Very cool.
Very interesting.
Okay, so we're going to continue in our study of Parshat Noach, and we are in the section on Noach, page 80, Breshit Tet, the 9th chapter of Genesis, Pasuk Yud Aleph, the 11th sentence. And the idea of this parish, again, because we have someone new joining us this week, is that each note that is underneath either a word or a set of words tells us that there is a particular feature either in that word or that set of words, and both the shape, the placement, and the type of note, and whether the note tells you that that word joins to another word or separates from the other word, tells you part of the story that is going to be told by that word alone. And we start with Vahakimoti, and I will confirm the note underneath the Tav is a Mahapach, That is something that looks sort of like a greater sign. So what's it going to do? It's going to take the concept that you had before, and then it's going to focus it or narrow it to a point and tell you that it's going to lead to something much more narrow than there was there before. So, and then we come back in the Perush, you'll notice that it says number 1, Vahakimoti, and it's got the note, and then if you look to the very bottom underneath the pasuk, you see number 1, just at the very bottom of the page there, and it tells you what this word is trying to imply to us. In summary, I will confirm my intention for peace and equilibrium with all those who survived the flood or who will arrive afterwards, as indicated by the shape of the reading mark. So, if you'll recall, Noach is learning the new reality that is going to happen after the creatures come out from the ark, and his fears of the same thing happening afterwards as happened before the flood are being allayed by the new set of rules that God has set for the world afterwards. So we're going to take all of that and we're going to narrow it down to say, how do we know that all of that God has just told Noach is going to happen? Because, number 2, et briti. This one has a pashta, this one has the note on top of the tav there, which emphasizes the word but leads it forward into the next word that's after it. With my treaty, number 2. With my treaty, I will assure the duration, function, and efficient performance for all creatures, along with the constructive forces which are to participate in the rebuilding of the world, as shown by the directional shape of the reading mark. So Briti is going to lead us forward. We're going to be narrowed down. All of those things that God said is going to now be channeled into this treaty that God is going to make with us. And what's the Briti going to the deal going to be? Itchem. This one has a katon. The katon, you'll notice on top of the kaf, is 2 dots. Whenever we see a katon, we're going to notice that this word is going to have 2 things that are going to be implied by the phrase that it's talking about. So number 3, with all you. However, my treaty will become practical if it is shared with all you. Ignoring my promise will be equivalent to self-destruction, as pointed out by the bipartite shape of the reading mark. So you're now given a choice. You're given a choice to participate or not to participate. If you participate, then you will have all of the benefits of these new rules, and if you don't participate, you will have all the punishment implied. So you have, again, the 2 things that are implied that are making the treaty with you. If you do it, then you get this, and if you don't do it, then you get the opposite of it. Velo yikaret, with a darga. So this is a note that emphasizes the word but sweeps it forward into the phrase that's going to come after it. And not shall be annihilated, number 4. Reciprocally, you accept my covenant, and not shall be annihilated the balance of the species, nor their coexisting interdependence, as stressed by the shape of the reading mark. So the things that are on the world, the things that are lower, and this is why it's a note that's underneath the word, are going to maintain their balance, and they're going to maintain their position in the world. Kol basar, all flesh. This one has a tavir. Tavir is a note that has a round shape with a dot sort of sheltered in between. So this is going to be something that's going to imply that something is being nurtured or preserved or kept sheltered by something else. Kol basar, number 5, all flesh. All flesh is to be considered individually on its merits. The guilty and innocent shall not be punished simultaneously by the same measure, as denoted by the shape of the reading mark. So punishment is not going to be absolute. Punishment is going to be individualized. And therefore, you are protected by who you are, your status, your position, your inputs are going to be something that is protective for you versus something which was applied before the flood, the concept of all mankind being responsible for all the acts of all mankind, and therefore the punishment might not be directly related to you. So your personality, your good deeds up until this point will be something that shelters you from something else that might happen in the world. Number 6, Od. This is a tipcha. This note tells us that we're going to focus back on something that has come before, and we're going to pause slightly after this word. If heavenly punishment must be applied again, there will be a clear separation between one kind and the other, as referred backwards by the directional shape of the reading mark. So again, if there is going to be punishment again, looking back at the punishment that's already happened, then it's going to be in the sheltered sense of kol basar, that each animal and species and so on will have its own ability to protect itself versus the concept of a collective type of a punishment. Mimei, from waters of, this is a munach. A munach has a rather sharp shape. It starts with a straight line and then goes forward. So what this is going to tell you is the concept that we're talking about is separated out from what comes before, but it is then going to lead to something new that comes afterwards. Number 7, mimei. In any event, no indiscriminate destruction will be caused from waters of a uniform distribution where no individual exceptions can be observed, as suggested by the shape of the reading mark. So again, we're saying that the type of collective worldwide punishment that happened with the flood, that won't happen anymore. There's going to be a separation from the way that things happened before to the way that things are going to go from here on in. Hamabul, this is an etnachta. This note is the middle of a sentence. It has a major pause after it, and you'll notice by its shape it's something that has a stable base and perhaps has something, so it's under the bait there, something that might be a little bit elevated about it. Number 8, the flood. If a deserved catastrophe must be applied, the flood will not be brought on, but other means will be found as expressed by the stabilizing shape of the reading mark. So there will still be the concept of justice in the world, and justice in the world is something that protects the world from continuing to have evil. So there will still be a source of returning stability and returning some common sense and moral sense to the world, but it won't be a collective destabilizing world-changing event like the Mabul, like the flood. Velo yiyeh, and not shall be. So this is a mercha, the note that's under the second hay there. This note tells us that this word is good, or this word combination is going to be connected to what's going to come after it, lightly connected to what's come before, but most strongly it's sweeping us forward into what's going to go after it. Because of the uncontrollable nature of the wild water, so we're at number 9 now over here. Because of the uncontrollable nature of the wild water, it is not suitable for punishment, and not shall be applied as a destructive element, as specified by the directional shape of the reading mark. So we're lightly connected to the word mabul. So again, we're talking about floods and water, and we're going to say that in the future this is od, number 10. This is again a tavir, that note that implies that something is being sheltered or protected. Number 10. Although more disasters are foreseen for the future, the essence of punishment will be of a different nature, as illustrated by the shape of the reading mark. And again, we're relaying the concept that punishment will be more individualized and less collective, and because of that, your individual actions can shelter you or make you more susceptible to particular punishment, and that you won't be held responsible for things that really are not something that you did. And in that sense, even getting a punishment has a sense of some shelter, some protection about it. Mabul, a flood. This has a tipcha. So again, we said the tipcha is a note that focuses us backwards on the things that just happen and pauses slightly after that. There will not be a flood, other disasters that will have deep consequences, but will not affect everybody to the same extent, as conveyed by the reverse direction of the reading mark. And again, we're focusing on the concept that punishment and reward after the flood will be different. So we have to look backwards to what happened before, and we again express the concept of lo yiyeh with the idea of punishment after this point being in a way that can shelter you from collective punishment. Lishachet, for destroy. I'm sorry. We have two comments before we get v'lo yiyeh od mabul. So sometimes in the parish we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to actually take whole phrases that are not related to the notes, and we're just going to say something that the writer of the book, Victor's father, found salient or interesting or important to mention at this point. So remarks number 1, v'lo yiyeh od mabul. Hashem lamabul yashab. So we have in Tehillim the phrase that God for the flood returned. This pseudo-contradiction should be understood by the grammar, la mabul, for the state of the flood, not la mabul. When God was sole king of the world as at creation, as explained by the second part of the sentence, Vayeshav Hashem melech le'olam. So what we're saying is the word or the letter la at the beginning of a word is in fact contracted le ha, to the. So it's two words that are put together. Not so God didn't sit for the flood. Rather, for God, there was a flood when before that time God sat and reigned supreme, sat and reigned alone. Did we understand that or not, or was that a little too cryptic?
Yeah, a little.
So what we're saying is that what does it mean God Yashav came back or returned or sat for the flood? He didn't sit there or remain for the sake of there being a flood. Rather, he created a flood so that he could continue to reign over the world. Reign in the R-E-I-G-N sense, not R-A-I-N, to be king in the future by applying a different sense of justice before and after. When Noach was puzzled over how an innocent would escape the disaster in case of general catastrophe, God mentioned the flood when species who qualified for survival came on their own to the proper place and at the right time, in the sense that one would unintentionally do something which would save him. So again, we're talking about your own actions influencing the level of protection that you would get after the flood. And we continue on. Lishachet with a mercha. So this is lightly tied to the things that go before it, but is mostly sweeping us forward into what's going to go on. So we're at number 12, and you'll notice the note is after the chet there. It sort of curves forward. Besides, each future action designed for destroying shall be limited in scope rather than of generalized effect, as demonstrated by the directional shape of the reading mark. So even though things are going to be destroyed, certainly other things are going to remain. So each thing from here on in that is going to eliminate something is going to be limited to those things that were responsible for that and not be collectively applied. Haaretz, the earth, with a sof pasuk. This is the end of a sentence. It's a stabilizing type of a note. This tells you that there's going to be something stabilizing or something that's going to make to make more permanence after as applied to this word. The earth, number 13. The earth shall not be affected. Thus it would easily regenerate and continue its functions to build the basis for an improved civilization after a reasonable waiting period. So even future disasters, the earth will maintain a lot more of its potential than the general destruction that we saw after the flood, the general destruction that included some of perhaps changing of the rules of nature and changing of certainly the shape and function of the earth. And again, another note, I wonder how this covenant can be reconciled with the Shoah. So this is always a difficult question on the psyche of the Jewish people, and a difficult theological question in general. How do bad things happen to good people? And there is never a single satisfying answer, and part of Judaism tells us that we always need to ask so that we can live with the reality that comes with things that are difficult for us to understand or expect, and yet accept that that is the reality, and we need to inculcate it into the way that we act and behave from here on in, even without full understanding.
It's funny because before I even saw that note, that was one of my thoughts, but that the Shoah is man-inflicted. What came to mind first were the other floods that happening now in Peru. Thousands of people are being swept away, like they are localized disasters of human populations, tsunamis and floods, where entire populations are just swept away, but they are still more localized.
That's it, segments of as opposed to the entire. I mean, as much as I'd be the last person to be able to explain or to reconcile the Shoah with this covenant, but one can raise an argument that at least it's only a segment of the society, it's a segment of as opposed to worldwide, absolutely everywhere.
But the Shoah, noticing the difference, the Shoah is man-implemented.
For sure.
Tsunamis are nature. Very different.
I mean, there are famous stories of some of the yeshivas in Europe in the 1800s and so on. And every so often they'd be visited by a traveler or a visitor. I think it was the Mir yeshiva. Somebody came to the Mir when it was still in Europe, and he had been traveling to China. He told them about an earthquake that happened in Shanghai. They're thousands of miles away. And what was their response? What did we do, and how do we have to change ourselves because thousands of people died miles and miles and miles away from us? Mm-hmm. You're not going to feel any of the shaking. But you have to examine why things are brought into your sphere of influence. Anything that you are told, you have to try and rationalize. If something really horrible happens, is there something that you can improve about yourself or improve about what you're doing to make this a world that wouldn't deserve such a thing? And while there is no collective responsibility, there is responsibility to improve yourself to the point that you would be inured, you would be protected from something like that happening in your surrounding. So if you know that something like that is happening in Peru now, the question becomes, what's wrong in the world that you have personal influence over, that you can make a little better. And no, that's not going to necessarily make life better for anybody in Peru, but it might make the world a little bit of a better place and perhaps influence others to be not so deserving of things like that. And sometimes
So it doesn't distinguish between natural disasters and man-made disasters? Like there's...
So, man-made disasters, people have the ability to make choices. Ultimately,
Well, the Shoah,
we do
I'm saying,
believe
is a man-made
we
disaster.
do believe that God gives us the ability to come to the point of having this test put in front of us and